Alright folks, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in again. And for those of you first joining me, welcome. Today we're going to be recapping a G5 Xserve Power Supply. I just got this in a few days ago. See what the state of it is. Right. Now, I've done a video about recapping an Xserve G5 Power Supply before, but that was a live stream. Well packaged. That was a live stream, and today I wanted to make an actual video to see if I can get some things better in frame, take my time to explain some stuff, and all that. So, this power supply belongs to Tony Chow, or Tony Kayo. I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name, Tony, but told you I'd give you a shout out. First thing I notice here is that there's a bracket missing, but I should still be able to test this without that bracket. This is a revision 1 power supply. So I should have all the caps I need to get this done. So, clean up a little. Get the right screwdriver. Is that the right screwdriver? Yeah, that'll do. Take this thing apart. Now this will also be the first video where I use an external microphone, which you're hearing me through now, and I'm also using 2 cameras. I got this webcam set up for an overhead view, and I got my iPhone set up for a bit of a closer view, and if I want to show you some stuff, I can take it off the tripod, show you around. Which reminds me, I should probably take a look and see if the phone is even in frame. It is! Fantastic. So, let's have a look. Let's open this up. Take a look inside. Woo! That's a lot of dust bunnies. I have only ever once seen one of these power supplies that was completely clean on the inside, and it was used in a data center where they of course manage the air quality and air temperature very, very carefully. But when you use this in a home environment, I don't care how hard you try to keep it clean, you're not going to keep the dust bunnies out. These things are vacuum cleaners. Now, I promised Tony that I would test it before I got started. So, let me just get a power cable here. Plug this in. And there is no click when I connect it to the power. Turn this around. Grab the multimeter. All right. Let me set this up in a way where you can see what I'm about to measure. Let's see, we got ground on the outside. Now, I can't see because I'm pointing the camera at you. What are we getting? Absolutely, definitely not 12 volts. 26 millivolts, which is not going to power an Xserve. So this thing is definitely busted. Tony, you're not crazy. This thing is broken. So let's turn this off. Put it away. Now usually I can always see what I'm doing through the phone screen or OBS on the main screen. Right now I'm working blind, so I hope everything is in frame. If not, it looks like I'm doing one of these power supplies almost every 2 weeks at least. So if I mess this one up, I'll get the next one. We're gonna keep taking this apart. And if you're wondering how would I take one of these apart if I've never done so before, I have a guide on my website and you can follow along there. Let's see, there's a little discoloration on some of these pins. I don't know if this is properly visible. Nothing to worry about, but it looks like the kind of plastic discoloration you would find in a smoky environment. Ooh, I need some microfiber. Okay. Luckily, I just did a load of laundry for all my microfibers, so I got stacks and stacks of them. Take off whatever surface dust you can find. Be careful around this big heatsink because there's a lot of thermal paste. Look at that. Yummy. And as with every Xserve G5 power supply I've opened so far, I cannot see any bulging caps. I'm pretty sure that the culprit is in this corner here, because that's usually where I see tiny signs of leakage, but I've never seen a bulging cap. So they don't fail spectacularly, but they do fail. So I'll probably be fast forwarding through most of this because the guide I keep on the website explains it all on how to take it apart and how to put it back together. So I may or may not bore you with that in this video. There's a few zip ties holding these fan and power cables together. You want to clip those off. All right. And then you need a flathead screwdriver. I can't help myself. I'm still narrating what I'm doing, even though it's online. You take a flathead screwdriver, put that between the connector and whatever you call the outside of the connector. Turn it slightly, a few millimeters, so that you can take the plug out. Same with this one. Now these plastics are not brittle, but you don't want to use a giant flathead screwdriver and turn it too far, because you will break it. Okay, time to take the board out. Move back to a regular Phillips. Okie dokie. Let's see if he's willing to come out. Take a piece of tape, get that cable out of the way. There. All right, let's see. Ooh. Collect some bunnies. If I were to sneeze right now, I'd be in a lot of trouble. Now, of course, I'm going to clean this entire thing out as I'm recapping it. But you might as well get what you can grab when you have easy access to all of it. There. That should be most of it. Probably not. And we can take the board out. Close the plastic. Put it on top here. And there's that thermal paste I mentioned. All right. Now it is very dusty, but overall, this looks in very good shape. So what we got to do now, and I have to check to see if I'm still in frame. Yeah, kind of. What we want to do now is separate the board from these two cables that go to the power socket. So let me get the right tip in the iron. Last time I had some trouble with these tips because I will admit I did not pay full price for the original Hakko tips. These are cheap Chinese knockoffs. And last time I found that even though this tip is huge, it did not heat up far enough. So I'm going to give this a try. And if that doesn't work, I'll switch back to an original Hakko tip. So let's warm up the iron. Also introducing today is this ginormous solder sucker that I got from Bruce, Brankus Creations from Australia. Sent this to me a month and a half ago. It took its sweet time, but it made it. And I have named it the Bruceinator, because this thing is a freaking animal. And I'll show you. In comparison, what I used before, what's this? So this gets the job done when you're working with tiny pads and small traces of solder. You melt it. It'll get the job done. But you do that twice, the nozzle gets clogged. When you push this out, it doesn't push all the way through the nozzle, and it's just a headache to clean this every 5 seconds. In comes the Bruceinator. This thing will, this will suck up anything. I tested it on a few ridiculously large pads a few days ago when I got this in. It's crazy. And it has a pin that cleans the nozzle between turns. So let's test it out. Come on. Hey. So this thing is pumped up. Let's see how far we get. All right. Wow. This thing is powerful. I love it. Do it one more time just for good measure. Now the other one. Yeah, this tip loses its heat very quickly. I wonder why, because all the other knockoff tips that I have, they perform really well. This big one just doesn't. Let me add a little bit of solder to it. Wow. I love this thing. Thank you, Bruce. Let's see, was it enough to get these cables out? Usually they have little barbs on two sides of these cables to hold them in place. It was not enough to free the cables, unfortunately. So, should I switch tips or try it again? Okay. There, a little gentle nudge. Too many wires. All right, got those cables off. There we have them. So we can put this whole thing aside. Get back, you. And there it is. Now we got some freedom to move stuff around as we need it. So let's keep taking it apart. Heatsink comes off. There it is. I'm going to clean this all off, so don't worry about the dust right now. And there we have it. Access to everything we need to recap this puppy. So what I'm going to do first is get rid of this thermal paste. And I have no idea why I just grabbed a Q-tip to do this. Not smart. Hold on. There we go. I'm so used to cleaning small stuff all day long. Q-tips are my automatic go-to, but in this case, paper towels are definitely more suitable. There. Okay, now that all that stuff is gone, I'm going to take a paintbrush. I'm going to take this next to my air purifier, set it to max, and get all this black dust out. So, we are back. Okay, I'm not going to claim I got all of it, but hopefully I got most of it. Now the next problem we face is this white goop. It's, I believe it's some kind of thermal paste and glue to kind of hold stuff together. and work with heat dissipation. It's called Celastic, I remembered, and this is hard as a rock. If you want to start taking this apart with pliers and knives and all kinds of stuff, it's going to take you forever. So what you want to do, and I hope this is in frame, see, I cannot grab this right now. It's hard as a rock. Can't do anything with it. So we're going to take a heat gun and apply just for a few seconds a little bit of heat to loosen that stuff back up. Now I got my heat gun set to 420. So it's pretty hot. Now there's a lot of plastic around here, so go easy. Keep moving around, don't stick around in the same spot. Just get it a little warm. Put the heat gun away and see what you got. See? Nice and soft, comes right off. Now you might have to do this a few times because as it cools down, it will harden up again. But just keep doing that until you got it all. And don't remove it where you don't need to be. So right now I'm just removing this between capacitors. It's already hardening again. But for example, this, what is this, a MOSFET? I'm not good with names of all these components, but this has Celastic on this side. Just remove what you need to remove to get to the capacitor, and that's it. Leave the rest where it's at. Now you might have to give it a second after you heat it up to find the sweet spot, because when it's too hot, it is basically snot, and your tweezers will go right through. It has to harden a little bit so that it has the right consistency for you to take it off. It's hard to explain, but if you do this, you'll figure out what I'm talking about. Alright, those are free and clear. So I got one capacitor here. It's now free. This one here is free. All the others Celastic, I'm just going to leave it in place. Warm it up a little after, when you're all done. Push it all back in place to where it belongs. Alright, let's keep going. There's more under there, but there's yellow tape here and there's some cables here. So you got to be really careful with how much heat you apply. That stuff will melt in just a few seconds. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That's all of them. And I'm covered in stuff. Alright. All the capacitors are free. So now we can flip it around, start desoldering them. Before I do, I'm going to clean up my desk a little bit. Or maybe I'll just leave it like this. But I need to go take a break. It is 95 degrees Fahrenheit, which translates to 35 degrees Celsius. And as I was doing this, I heard my air conditioning grind to a halt. So wish me luck. I'll be right back. Alright. Luckily, it was just a loose cable. Damn chipmunks, they chew on everything. I did take a second to wash my hands. Not that it's going to matter. They're going to be very, very dirty again in just a minute. So, we got all this elastic out. All the caps are loose. Or loose enough for extraction anyway. I think. Maybe not that one. We'll see in a minute. And now we can start desoldering them. If this is a first, let's see if I've got one. And you don't want to be sitting there with a soldering iron. Flip this thing around, see where you gotta be. Then take a marker first. Find the capacitor, find the corresponding pins, and just mark them in red. That one, that one. And don't be shy with the marker. All this stuff comes right off with some alcohol after you're done. You just want to see where you're at. Now, I know most of these pins by heart by now, but I'm just showing you what you can do. Hopefully this is in frame. So find the capacitor, find the pins, mark it out. So we have one here, one here, and this is a Sharpie permanent marker. It'll still come off with alcohol, don't worry. Get some pins over here. A little bit of scorching here that I will have to look into before I finish up. See if that's important or if that's normal. Let's see, there's another one right here. So I marked out a few. Then we're going to take the iron and get all the solder out. Where's Bruceinator? Oh, here he is. This tip is not working out. So I'm gonna try a smaller one. Still a knockoff, but it is a chisel tip, which is definitely the best choice for this kind of work. Let's see if the smaller one heats up more. It's a little counterintuitive, but that big tip is not great. Beep. Come on. Beep. There you go. Nah, still not doing it. I'm just not going to have to be a cheap ass and buy the original Hacko tips. More like it. I might have to add some fresh solder to all of them, because this is not heating up enough. And it's definitely not for a lack of socking. This thing is amazing. My iron is definitely not getting up to temperature the way it should. Using original Hakko tips that work fine every other time and fine on everything else, it is barely heating it up enough for me to get the solder off the pins, and thus all these holes are still full of solder. Now I'm going to have to wick it and see if I can get all that stuff out. Which, of course, for the purposes of making a video, is going to take for freaking ever. And it's not fun to watch at all. So, I might fast forward the removal of all these capacitors, or cut it out completely. But you get the idea. Mark them all with a permanent marker or a Sharpie. Don't go overboard, of course. Heat up the solder. Suck the solder out. If you don't have a solder sucker, you can use wick. Let me find one. Here's one. You can just put the wick up against the pin, heat it up, and if your iron gets hot enough, all the solder should just pull into the wick braid. Like that. And what you're left with is an empty hole. Now you may also take some tweezers, take the pins carefully and straighten them out. That way when you pull the capacitor out from the other side, you don't have a lot of resistance and you can just pull them out. That should do it. Let me see. That's this tiny one here. And I only got one pin, but that's better than no pins at all. Come on. There. So you can use wick, you can use a solder sucker, but if your iron doesn't get hot enough, which is what I'm gonna look into now for mine, it's not gonna matter. You might be able to get the solder off the pads and off the pins, but it's still gonna be in the holes, which is just a pain in the ass to try and clear up after the fact. So I'm gonna investigate and continue the video as soon as I resolve this. All right. Took a little break, let my office cool off, had a sandwich, checked out the soldering iron. It has to be the tips. It has to be the tips because I cannot get it up to temperature. So we're just gonna keep working with what we got and see how far we get. Now I got those caps out. What's next? I think these are next. Alright, that should do it, hopefully. Now these are very hard to reach with your fingers, so you're gonna need some pliers to get in there. Now be very careful, because this daughter card here is full of tiny components that are right next to it. So you don't want to hit that and damage it as you extract these capacitors. And one of the pins is still stuck. Yeah, almost had it. I got one pin on each. Not bad. Now there's one capacitor that on the other side of the board, and I hope this is in focus. The pin ends up right next to these two, whatever they are, resistors, capacitors, I don't know. If you use a solder sucker there, it'll take the solder off the entire thing, and these usually come flying off. I learned that very early on. So what you want to use there is some wick, and just wick enough, not to absorb all of the solder, but enough to clear that hole. And whatever you do, take your time. And as soon as you extract that capacitor, go back in there, add a little bit of solder. Not enough to cover the hole, but just to keep everything in place. And that one came right out. Okay, let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That's all of them. Ready to do some cleanup. And how I do the cleanup is I take some needle nose pliers with a flat tip, so that I can just get on there close to the board without scraping the board, of course, and pull out all this elastic that might be in my way. And if it's too small, just use tweezers. I am happy with this. I hope I'm in frame and focused, but that's looking pretty good. Now with all those extra components out of the way, I'm going to take my brush one more time, clean off dust and dust bunnies from all the places I couldn't reach before. So bear with me. Voila! And if you feel brave, you may even use some compressed air, just to show yourself how much you actually missed with the brush. This was a bad idea. But the things we do for our customers. Anyway, it's all clean now, unlike my desk, as you can see from the top view there. It's time to inspect all the holes, make sure they're clear, wick if they are not. Now I cleared them all already, So what I like to do is take a little pin, go through each hole, and if this pin fits in, it's open enough for the capacitor that needs to take that place. If the holes are still full of solder, do not use a pin like this to clear them out, because you will risk damaging the pad on the other side. When all that solder is pushed out, the pad can go right along with it, which of course you don't want. Now another good way to test to see if all the holes are clear is hold it up against the light. Now in my case the light is behind the camera, but just look through. If you can see the light through the holes, you are good to go. And it appears that I missed one. There we go. Alright. With all the old capacitors removed and all the holes clear, all this elastic gone where it doesn't need to be, it is time to put the new capacitors in. So, you go to my website. I'll overlay it or put the link in the description, where you will find a list of all the capacitor values and where they need to be. Now, I'm not selling these, but if you watch this video and you want a kit, let me know. This is the whole kit for all revision 1 and 2 power supplies, has all the capacitors in it, and comes with instructions. So, let's take a look. Whoa! Pretty black and white printout, isn't that awesome? So, you got a list of all the capacitors, a little checkbox so you keep track of what you've already done, and a map with all the capacitor locations. This comes straight from the website, so you can either pull up the website or use the printout if you get one of these kits. Like I said, I'm not selling these things yet. I don't know if I'm going to, but I have a bunch. So if you see this video, you want to try this yourself, let me know. I'll hook you up with one of these kits. So, let's see. All the capacitors are individually packed with the values and the locations corresponding to this little map. Whatever I can do to make it easier on you. Now, I will be using my own cheat sheet. So, I'm going to hang this up right here and start putting some capacitors back in. And this is going to be pretty boring to watch because, you know, that's just nature of the beast. This is boring stuff. So I'm going to fast forward this and I'll be back once it's time to solder all this stuff into place. Alright, the first capacitors are in, and I just wanted to slow down the video a second and show you something. All the capacitors have a stripe on it, on one side. That stripe lines up with the stripe on the marking on the board. So make sure you keep an eye on that. Don't reverse the polarity. Put them through, level them out with one hand, and then flatten the pins on the other hand, on the other end, so you can solder them down easily. And we got the last one, C10. Let's see, polarity that way. And that's it. They're all in. So what you're left with is this spider web of pins sticking out. Now the rest is very simple. Clean up a little here. Take your iron, start soldering them all into place. Now, because my iron is not getting fully up to temperature, I am going to be using a little bit of flux to help flow the solder into the right place. If you have an iron that properly heats up, you will have enough flux in your solder wire to take care of this. There. Now, time to solder it all into place. And if this is the first time you're doing such a thing, you've come this far, don't mess it up now. Solder it the right way. If you need tips on helpful soldering techniques, check out my buddy Bruce's channel, Brankus Creations. He has videos about everything you need to become an expert solderer. How to solder, techniques, tools, how to fix damaged pads, you name it, he's got it. So if you're not sure, go check out his channel first before you give this a shot. That man will have you soldering like a pro in no time. Now, I'm pretty comfortable adjusting the angle at which I solder. If you're not, just rotate the board as you need to. Because for some reason, and I did this a lot when I started out, I don't know why, something goes on in our heads where you feel like you have to maneuver yourself in all kinds of weird angles to get it done, instead of just having the common sense to stop, rotate the board, and keep going that way. I don't know, I can't explain it. I've seen a lot of people do it. I used to do it. But yeah, stop and just adjust as needed. Okay, then take some clippers and start removing all these legs that are sticking out. Now, take tweezers, use your hands, whatever you need to make sure that these do not go flying all over the room. Like that. And if they do get away from you, make sure they're not under where you're working. And I'll touch on that in a minute as to why. Alright, as to why you want to keep very close track of all these pins that you clip off, one of the first power supplies I did, I'm clipping all this stuff off, turn it around, keep going, put it all together, and zap. The thing just didn't work, smoke came out, wasn't good. Took it apart, and one of the pins was stuck to the board in a very unfortunate place. Now, this is full of flux and sticky goop. It's very easy, if you're working, you turn this around, you clean it up, you do stuff, for one of the pins to get stuck on here. So be very careful, because that will be a real waste of what is more than likely a perfectly fine power supply. Now I'm going to go over this with a Q-tip and some alcohol. Clean the mess I made. Make sure it's not sticky. Everything is the way it should be. And then we'll put it all back together and do a quick test. Now I do all the fine stuff with a Q-tip, and then I go over it with a brush, anti-static brush, a little bit of alcohol. This was already very dirty and pretty sticky when I got it. I just want to make sure I get as much of it off. Because sticky is fine. Sticky is not going to cause any harm. But sticky can trap dust. And dust can trap moisture. So you just want to get this as clean as possible before you send it back or before you start using it yourself. Now, I did take a look at this earlier under the microscope. It's just a little bit of flux from the original manufacturing. No problem. All right. Oh. Take the worst of the alcohol off. Beautiful. Shiny, pretty. Everything we ever wanted. So, there it is. Recap power supply. What I'm going to do now is let this dry for a minute. You never know where some alcohol might get trapped. It evaporates really quickly, but if it's stuck under a component that the air might not easily reach, it might linger for a little bit longer. So I'm going to let this dry. Once it's dry, I'm going to go over the board one more time. Spot clean whatever I feel is in need of some cleaning. Then we're going to put it back together and do a test. And we're back. So, everything is dried up. Nothing that I see needs any more spot cleaning. So I think we're ready to start putting this back together. Now before we do, let's take the enclosure and a microfiber and go over the thing one more time. Get all that yummy, delicious dust out. Yummy. Give it a little clean home to sit in. Now, of course, we have to put these power wires back on. Make those a little easier to manage. There. And there. Okay. Let's see. It sits in there like that. That goes through like that. So. That's one. Now when putting these wires back on, you do not want to skimp on the solder. Lay it on thick. Make sure it can flow all the way through into that hole. thing. Use a little bit of flux. Beautiful. And we're done with the soldering iron. A little bit of alcohol to clean it up. And it's ready to go back in. Voila. Then, let's get some of the stuff out of the way here. Get your Phillips and put everything back the way you found it. Now the board screws all have one of these spacer rings on it. The outside case screws do not. So that's how you can easily tell them apart. And the 3 screws that hold this in place also have those same rings. Apart from that, the ones for this and the board are the same, so you can mix and match. And the screws for the outer case don't have rings. Easy enough. Okay, now we're going to put this heatsink back together. I use a little bit of the thermal paste I use in my day-to-day repairs. Gets the job done just fine. Take a little black stick or any kind of spudger, just spread it out. Doesn't have to be perfect. The pressure of the heatsink plate that we're going to put on top of this will do most of the work for you. You just want to make sure that any scratches or uneven parts are properly covered. Then this can go back up, back on. And where's my screw bit? Oh, still in there. Need a slightly smaller Phillips. And as they say in certain parts of the world, Bob is your uncle. Route this back here. Like that. There you go. Now you can reattach these cables here and these here with another zip tie. I usually don't, unless the cables are really, really, what you call it. For example, the cables in here is the kind of cable that you find in a 100-year-old house. You know, it's really sturdy, it won't bend the way you want it to. Sometimes these fan cables are the same. These are, you know, modern cables, very flexible. I don't have to zip tie them to keep them out of my way. So this will do just fine. And there you have it. One power supply recapped. Let's put it back together. Let's see. This hooks in there from the bottom. And then folds over just like that. Now usually there's a few more screws here and here, but where this bracket belongs. And look at that. I'm so distracted, I forgot to put this back in. Idiot. There, it's looking better. The bracket that goes over here, like I said, I don't have it. It might be separate in a box, but looks like yeah, looks like Tony kept it, which is fine. I don't need it for the repair or for testing. So now let's plug it in, see what we got. Let me find my multimeter. That there so you can see it. Ground goes there. That goes there. And power cable. Ready? Let's do this. I heard a click. That's a good sign. And we got 12.16 volts. Beautiful. This power supply is as it should be. Awesome. But of course, we want to test this in an actual Xserve. Not that the multimeter is lying, but we want to see if it can take the pressure of being in an actual Xserve. So let me disconnect this camera, take it down to the basement, then we'll do a quick test there and wrap the video up. Alright, we are here in my beautiful unfinished basement. I took one of the cluster nodes, took my power supply out, put this one in. Let's see if it works. Ain't that a beautiful sound? Awesome.
Gorgeous. And it booted up. All right, time to take this out, wrap it up, send it back to its owner. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you on the next one.